all you action figure enthusiasts out there, JC here with another T&I toy review. And for today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the brand new DC Essentials Deathstroke figure from DC Collectibles. Now this is the second figure to be released in this new 7-inch scale line. I looked at the first figure in this series, which was Batman, the other day. Hopefully you checked out that review. Now this figure comes packaged in a similar style that we see with all the DC Collectible action figures. You've got the window box with the figure clearly displayed. With this particular figure, you've got dark navy colors with the white. Up at the top, you've got the DC Essentials logo and the name of the character. Also, because DC Collectibles is celebrating 20 years of putting out product to collectors, you've got that little logo in gold foil. And then down below, you've got the DC Collectibles name, and it says direct from the source. Also, it tells us, again, this is figure number 2 in the series. On the side of the packaging, you just have an image of the figure. And then on the back, you again have an image of the figure, a brief bio for the Essentials line and Deathstroke himself, and that's in multiple languages. And then down below, look at all the figures in the first wave. So again, Batman, which I looked at the other day, and then the Flash and Reverse Flash, which I'll be looking at probably tomorrow. And then down below that, it tells us that all 4 of these figures were sculpted by Paul Harding. All right, let's get this open and take a look at what's inside. Okay, so here's a look at the figure outside the packaging along with the other contents. Now, first of all, let me just say a big thanks to the folks at DC Collectibles for sending me out this figure early so I could review it for you guys. This figure is actually slated with a July release date, so it'll start hitting comic and specialty shops next month. But again, a big thanks to the folks at DC Collectibles for sending me out one early, again, so I could give you guys an early look at the actual figure. Now this figure comes with a couple different accessories. In fact, the most accessories of any of the figures in the first wave. So first of all, you get his signature sword, and I like the detailing with the blade. You've got a little bit of cutout here up here at the top, and you've got some indentation here down the blade, and it's done with a metallic silver. And then you've got the handle with the metallic gold, and you've got some sculpting detail on that. And so I like the look of that. He does have this sheath, which is actually removable. It's a separate piece. It comes attached to the figure when you take it out of the packaging, but again, you can actually remove it if you want to, and it does fit, the sword does fit nice and tight in that sheath, so you don't have to worry about it falling out or anything. And it's done, the strap here is done with a rubber tape material, and then the sheath itself is done with a hard plastic. Also, you get a pistol with this figure, so, and a working gun holster, but again, I like the detail with the pistol. You've got the metallic silver, and then you've got this gray on the handle, and you've got some pretty nice sculpting detail. And then, like I said, he does have this working gun holster, which again is made with a rubber tape material. It connects to his belt up here, and then you've got the little straps on the leg. The straps are separate, but it looks like it's part of the holster when it lies, you know, by the side of his leg like that. And again, the gun does fit nice and tight there in the holster. Now, the one thing I want to point out here is, unfortunately, they only gave this figure one grip hand, and that's with the left hand. If they were only going to give him one grip hand, I would have thought it would have been with the right hand, so he could kind of reach for the pistol out of the holster. So that is a little bit disappointing. I would have recommended that they probably give this figure 2 grip hands as opposed to just 1, since he's got multiple weapons. Maybe going forward, that just should be the standard with all these figures. Instead of closed fist, give them a grip hand. Now the plastic is a little bit tight, so when you're first trying to get the pistol in the hand, you know, it might be a little difficult, but once you get it in there, and you can kind of loosen this up if you want with a hair dryer or something like that, but once you get it in there, he does hold the pistol and the sword as well nice and tight. Again, though, it would have been nice if they'd given the right hand the grip hand as opposed to the left hand. And here you can see he's holding the sword, and like I said, he does hold the sword nice and tight, so you don't have to worry about him dropping it or it falling out of his hand. And then the figure also has this little knife attached to the left ankle with a sheath. The sheath is actually a separate piece, so it'll move around a bit, but the knife itself is actually not removable, so you can't pull it out or anything, so it is there just for looks. Okay, now for the figure itself, this version of Deathstroke is based on the Rebirth storyline, so, you know, I think this costume and the way it looks, the way the figure looks, is very much in keeping with that. I like the detailing with the head sculpt. He's got the orange side on the left and the dark navy grayish color on the right side. I like how they've done the eye on the left side here with the whited out eye and the black around it. I like that detailing. I also like, you know, this line work that you have throughout the mask that gives it more of that kind of hard, you know, shell look to it. So I think that looks pretty good. On the right side, you've got the eyes covered up, but you can have sculpting detail to kind of show that. You got the jawline and everything. So overall, I think they've done a good job with the head sculpt. You've got the tassel pieces that come out the back, the dark navy and the orange, and that's done with a rubber material, so that looks pretty good. And then for most of the figure, you've just got this basic, again, I call it a dark navy with a little bit of a grayish tint to it that's throughout the figure, which I think looks good. You've got here on the left shoulder the orange with the line work to represent the chainmail. This is actually just painted on there, but it is solid black lines. There's no real sloppiness there, so I think that looks good. On the left side, on the arm, you've got this white sleeve, which honestly I don't really like, but I don't fault the figure for that. I just don't like, that's how it looks in the comic. I just don't like that white sleeve. I think it looks kind of funny. And then for the hands, you've got the orange gloves, again with the dark navy on there. So again, that's in keeping with how it looks in the comic. And you got this little square around his wrist on both sides. So I like that. You've got the sheath, as I mentioned before, and I like even on this strap, you've got some detail with the little clip there. So I think that looks pretty good. And then you've got the belt. These pouches are done with a rubber material, which are glued on there. So I think that looks pretty good. And you've got these straps that come down from the belt, as I mentioned before, for the holster. And then you've got these straps around his right leg, which are sculpted on there. And again, they're not connected to the actual gun holster. And then for the rest of the legs, they're just that dark navy color. You've got the little knife, as I mentioned before. And then you've got some orange and then gray on his feet here. And I like how they sculpted the soles on the bottom of the feet. Okay, now this figure stands, and there seems to have been a lot of confusion about this line, going in, that I noticed in my Batman review. It was pretty clearly stated from day one that these figures were going to be more in 7-inch scale than 6-inch scale. I'm not sure why some people seemed confused and thought these were going to be the same size as Marvel Legends. They are taller than Marvel Legends, only by a little bit. I don't think it's that big a deal personally, and I'll show you some comparisons in a minute. But again, I don't really understand why there was so much confusion over that. But this figure does stand almost exactly 7 inches tall if you count to the top of his head. If you want to measure to the top of his sword there, then it's closer to 7¼ inches tall. Okay, now here's a comparison with the DC Icons, which was a 6-inch scale figure, and you can see the new Essentials figure is much taller. Now if you want to take some accessories from the Icons, like say the bow staff, which wasn't included with the new Essentials figure, they will work with one another. So if you have accessories from other Deathstrokes, you should be able to use it with this figure. Okay, now here's a comparison with the older DC Collectibles 7-inch scale new 52 Deathstroke. And while not exactly the same height, the Essentials figure is a hair taller. These two are much closer to being the same size. And so if you collected these older new 52 figures, I think these new figures will definitely go well with those older ones. These older figures that DC Collectibles did were great figures. They had a lot of detail and everything. They just did not have great articulation, which is something these new figures definitely have. And here's a comparison with another 7-inch scale Deathstroke figure from DC Collectibles. This is based on the Arkham video games, and again, much similar to the same size. And again, if you want to take like accessories from this Deathstroke figure, you should be able to use them with this new Essentials figure. Now here's a comparison with a Marvel Select figure, Captain America, which is a 7-inch scale figure. And again, these two are much closer to the same height. Okay, and then finally, here's a comparison with a couple Hasbro Marvel Legend Deadpool figures. So we've got the X-Force Deadpool figure and then the more recent 90s Deadpool figure. Now this 90s Deadpool figure is actually shorter than this X-Force Deadpool figure. This is actually a pretty short Marvel Legend figure, but you can see both figures are shorter than the new Essentials figure. And again, that's because the Marvel Legends are more of a 6-inch scale line and the Essentials are more of a 7-inch scale line. And as I mentioned before, these Essential figures were never billed to be the same scale as Marvel Legends. I'm not sure why some people thought they were going to be, and they just weren't meant to be. If you want something more in keeping with Marvel Legends as far as scale, you're going to have to go with Multiverse from Mattel, and that is likely why you're not going to see that exact same scale from DC Collectibles, because there's just licensing things at play, and you're not going to see two domestic companies putting out figures of the exact same characters in the exact same scale. I know a lot of you want to complain about that, but it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. But like I said, where these figures shine over, say, Multiverse, is I do think the articulation is much better. If I had to choose between being the exact same scale or having better articulation, I would probably go with the articulation. But that's really just something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. Okay, now another area I wanted to address with these new figures is the gappage with the legs and the crotch section. So to me, it's not that big a deal. I didn't even really notice it until I started seeing people comment on it. And some of you seem to think that the gappage is too big. I've got this Marvel Legend, this Boomerang figure, and you can see gappage between the leg and the crotch, and maybe it's a little wider on the Deathstroke, but not by much. It's actually worse on this Spider-Man Homecoming figure. So, you know, there's a lot more Marvel Legend figures out there, but definitely, you know, that gappage is something that you generally see with most of these figures. So to me, it's not that big a deal. You could go the DC UC or multiverse route that Mattel does. They use those side hinges, which I don't think many of you like, so I don't think I would recommend that. If I was going to suggest anything to DC Collectibles, I would say they should probably go back and look at their icon figures. Something that they had started to incorporate with these was that you could actually pull the legs out from the socket, and then you could still get the posability, but then if you didn't want to have the gappage, you could just push the leg up into the socket there. So that seemed to kind of fix that problem overall, and might be something that they want to incorporate into these new figures. Okay, so now on to articulation. Now, one thing I just want to note real quick, if you caught my Batman review, or if you're going to go watch my Batman review, which if you haven't already, I hope you do, but I do want to apologize. In that video towards the end, especially with the articulation segment, the settings on the camera got changed somehow, the autofocus got messed up, and so there are definitely some portions of that video where things get a little bit blurry. I do apologize again for that. Hopefully that shouldn't be an issue with this video. So the articulation on this figure is pretty good. It is pretty solid. And one thing I want to note here, one of the minor issues I had with Batman is I felt there was a few areas where the joints were a bit loose. I have not experienced that with this figure, so hopefully that is a sign that that was just with my one figure, that Batman figure, and it won't be a problem with all the figures across the board. But nevertheless, the joints do seem to be fairly tight on Deathstroke here. Now with Deathstroke, he can turn his head to the left and to the right, and he cannot look down as much as the Batman figure does. The down movement on this one isn't as good, but he can still look up pretty good. You can get the head back pretty good with this one, so I do like that. You don't get a lot of head pivot with these, but overall head movement is decent on it. And then with the arms, you can get the arm out about that much on this one. You've got good rotation there at the shoulder. You do have the bicep swivel. You've got the double hinged elbows, so good bending there at the elbows. You've got rotation at the wrists and then hinges on the hands. And again, these joints are much tighter with these hinges on the hands than with the Batman figure, which is good. You've got an ab crunch type joint, so he can crunch down about that much, and he can look back about that much. So he's got pretty good back and forth movement there at the midsection. A little bit better, I would say, than the Batman figure. He also has a waist swivel. Now with the legs, you can do the splits good with these. You can get the legs out good, and then you can get the leg forward pretty good, and you can do the leg out and back. I think that's why they left that gappage there, so that you would get good movement with the legs and the articulation. Now these figures do incorporate thigh swivels, which we did not see on the icons, which is nice. You've got a double hinged knee, so good bending there at the knee, and then you get boot cuff swivels with these, so that's good. And then with the feet, you've got hinges, so back and forth movement, and you do have ankle pivot with these. You can also rotate the feet. Now with these figures, they do not have peg holes on the bottom of the feet. Okay, so that's my review. So overall, I really like this figure. In fact, I think I like it a little bit more than the Batman figure. I'm not a huge fan of the white sleeve, but it is perfectly in keeping with this Rebirth costume, so I can't fault the figure in any way for that. I think the overall look is good. You do get decent accessories. It would have been cool maybe if we'd gotten the rifle and staff too, but I'm sure you have something lying around that you can probably use with these figures, but you definitely get a signature sword, which looks good, as well as the pistol. Now, my one minor complaint with the figure is that they did not give him two grip hands. They only gave him one, and to make it even worse, they put the grip hand on the left side as opposed to the right, so you can't even have him reach for the pistol in the holster. I think going forward, it would be better in general if they just gave these figures grip hands as opposed to closed-fisted hands. You can, you know, they look kind of like fists even though they have the holes in them, so if you want to like mimic punching and stuff, I still think you can do that with the grip hands. And then if you want to give your figures multiple accessories, or even if it's a figure that doesn't have accessories, or want to give them something that you have from another figure, I just think it's better to have the grip hands. Overall though, I think this is a very solid figure. I like the overall look of it. I like the articulation. The joints are tighter on this figure than with the Batman, which is good. And I think if you're a fan of this character, you'll definitely want to check this one out when it comes out in July. Now, these will be hitting comic and specialty shops in places like Big Bad Toy Store. Big Bad Toy Store does have this figure currently up for pre-order. pre-order. We'll have a full image gallery up at toynewseye.com. There'll be a link in the video description below. As always, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you're so inclined, please like the video. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down below. I'd really appreciate it. You can also follow me on my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch accounts. I have links to all those in the video description as well. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you later.